Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Awais with another video. Today we are going to learn .NET development. It is going to be a project-based tutorial. I'll walk you through how you can use .NET minimal APIs to build backends. We will include some features like authentication, authorization, and also I'll show you how you can create backends. For this tutorial, we'll be using SQLite. So we're going to be starting by looking at what are minimal APIs for ASP.NET Core. We're going to be using the latest framework and we will be using their starter templates, which comes with a lot of pre-configuration. Without further ado, let's get started. Minimal APIs in ASP.NET Core are designed to create HTTP APIs with minimal dependencies, making them ideal for microservices and applications that aim to include only the essential files, features, and dependencies. This approach is particularly useful for lightweight and efficient API development. For those who prefer a more feature-rich approach, ASP.NET Core also supports creating APIs using controllers. This method offers more built-in features and is suitable for more complex applications. Let's talk about prerequisite for writing .NET code. First, you need to install .NET on your computer. You can use .NET on Windows, Linux, or Mac. Also, you need an IDE. The most popular IDE for .NET is Visual Studio. Second option is Visual Studio Code, the most famous text editor. It also has some .NET C# based extension, which will make your project open as a solution explorer like in Visual Studio. If you want text editor, go ahead and do it, but Visual Studio is much more superior at this stage. There's a third option available for .NET on Mac and Windows. It's called Writer. It is built by Endpoints, and you can also use that on Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's free for non-commercial use. So it's a great IDE. I believe this is not your first programming language or framework to learn, so you might have already installed Visual Studio Code. Next, install .NET on your computer. Go to .NET.microsoft.com/en-us/download. And depending on your operating system, that will show you the version to download. Over here, you can see I've got this .NET that I can install on Apple Silicon. But if you're in Windows, you might see the exe file. If you're in Linux, you can see the Linux downloader as well. I will show you the best way to install and work with .NET very easily using Docker. If I open Docker, you can see I've got a Docker desktop installed. That's what you need on your computer. Once installed, we can use Visual Studio Code to set up the .NET project easily. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code and create a new project. First, we need to make sure we have a couple of extensions installed. If you click here, and here you will see we got some extension. Let me zoom out a little bit. And here the extension that I'm trying to show you. C# and C# dev kit also install dev containers. I would suggest search for remote and install this remote development extension pack, which will install these dev containers, remote SSH, remote tunnels, WSL. I've already installed all those extensions, and you need to make sure you've got this C# extensions installed as well. C# dev kit and code for C#. Go to command palette, click on help, show all commands, start typing dev containers. Click on new dev container, allow this, and here it's giving me some options. I will be using .NET C#. I don't need Node.js, TypeScript, or SQL Server, so I will simply search for .NET. Here we have this dev container. Develop C# .NET application include all. Click on that, create container, just to make sure that you don't have an existing container with the same name. If you do, then it's going to be a problem. Once your container is running, make sure you have a C# dev kit installed in the container as well. Type C#, and then you will see the C# dev kit. Install that and this extension. Once this is installed, go to command palette. It could be F command for you if you're on Windows or on a Mac by default. So I'll use my shortcut key, which is option A. That's what I set. And I will start by typing .NET. Here you can see there's a .NET new project command. Click on new project, and then you will get some options. After it is going to install your .NET version in your dev container. Once you have downloaded the .NET dependency, you will see these options in a drop down and a bunch of startup templates that you can use to create your first project. For example, if you want to create a C# console application, you start with the console application. In our case, we are learning .NET Web API, so we're .NET Core Web API. And I'm going to use this web application 1 as a name, and we will create that in a default directory. I'll just say create project. Once I select that, you'll see the project. Here's our project, and this code has an extension for .NET and C# dev kit. Right click on a solution file, then click on open solution, which means it is going to open this project in a specialized .NET version solution explorer. If you're coming from Visual Studio, this is what you see usually in the .NET application in Visual Studio. Now we are using .NET 9 and OpenAPI.NET 9. Gives us this program.cs file, our entry file for our .NET APIs. So first of all, let's learn how do we run this application. There are multiple ways that you can run the applications. If you right click and then click on pre-build and clean, it will do certain operations. Open integrated terminal, login, going to web application 1 folder, type .NET run command. And once I do that, it will start restoring the project, and you will see that it is starting or listening on port 503. Let me open that in Chrome. You'll see it doesn't have anything, but when I do /weather and enter, you'll see weather data or API is working. Let's start learning what do we get when we create a project. Let's start by understanding the project file structure and main files. If you click on Web Application 1, you get to see this proj file, which has an extension of .cs, which tells you what is the project SDK. Any version specified here, that means that's the .NET SDK version you're using. We also have some package references. If you have a third-party packages installed, you will install them right here. But I'll show you how you can install other packages as well. You don't have to type things here directly. We're also going to look at this main file, which is a program.cs file, our main file. This is the main file that creates an API, and it has one endpoint. This is where our program starts. We also have app settings, the JSON file. Here we can get all the settings to configure your application. You can tap here and read this file in your .NET application. Here's a web application 1.html file used to test your API by doing HTTP call. Let's go to the program.cs file. Here's the main thing that we want to understand. First of all, I would like to get rid of this code and this code. You don't need this function. Okay, so at this stage, it's a plain code that you should write, and then your API should run. Let's start by looking at what is this web application dot and then parameters arg. This first line, you create a builder, and from the builder, you construct an application instance, which is an app. The builder has services property. By using services property, you can add features like cores, entity framework, or Swagger. Here we're adding add open, which adds open API related services to the default document to the specified service collection. So builder.services, and then you can add different kind of services using this. We will use cores, which is going to be really allowing only the specific websites to make a call or API. To add that, use builder, services, add cores, call the function, and then use the lambda options. We just set empty options for now. This is how you add different services to your .NET application. Here's the configuration. If your application is running in development, it will run this code, which means app.map open API as well. Then we have this app.use HTTPS redirection, which is going to make our application available on HTTPS as well. Then this function is pretty self-explanatory. It just helps you to run your code. Now there are other options available in the VS Code other than command line to run your .NET application. But let's start by looking at how do we run this API. So I will right click and say open in integrated terminal. And you can see we are in this folder. I want to go into web application folder. And in here, I will simply run a command called .NET run. Enter, and it will restart and try to run the project. Now it says there's a problem with our code, which means the port 5013 is already running, which means the project was already initialized and it's running. That's okay. We can just kill it and create a new terminal. .NET run command is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to run this on this 5013 port, and I'll just command click on it and open that in a Google browser. Here we have our API running, and I will show you how you can access the API. But in our case, we don't have any API in this case. Now, the APIs, we're using the CRUD operation, as you should already know, that we have get, post, put, and delete for CRUD. So what I'll do is I will create another endpoint, which will basically create a hello world endpoint. Dot map get, and that's the hello world. Save this, and the application is not gonna reload because we need to make sure we restart our application. If I want to make sure that every time I change code, I want to rerun the code and update my API. The command for that is .NET watch. Once you do that, it is going to keep looking for the file and update itself when the file changes. I'll refresh, and now you can see it returns hello world because this is the root level endpoint using this slash. Let's create a new endpoint. You can see the program rebuilding itself. Let's go in there, type hello, and it's not showing. There may be something wrong, so changes won't be applied. Refresh now, press R in the terminal. It says press Ctrl Alt to restart. Press Ctrl Alt to restart the API. If I refresh, you should see hello return from the API. We are going to start utilizing some sort of database in our application. We can use the in-memory databases, or you can also use any other databases using EF Core. EF Core stands for Entity Core Framework, which is basically an ORM in .NET world. So we're going to be using that. For that, we're going to have to install some NuGet packages. Go to Command Palette and say install NuGet package, add, and then here we are going to use in-memory, which is not going to use any database, just the in-memory database. Press enter and install the latest version. Verify by going to this page. We got this Microsoft Entity Core in-memory package as well. Next, we are going to install another package, which I'm going to show you. You can install terminal and the name of the package. And we are going to install Microsoft ASP Core Diagnostic Entity Core Framework. So that's going to help us to do some diagnosis for our database. So it's going to install, and then you will see we have that diagnosis appearing here. Let me open Screen Brush. So show you we got this package installed. Next, restart our application. So I go to terminal and press Ctrl C. It will shut down the application and use this .NET watch command and restart. Next, we are going to look at the model and database context classes in .NET to be able to use the data in our application. So we can use the conventional application, which is a to-do list, to demonstrate this tutorial. So I will go ahead and create some classes. I'm going to right click here, and we're going to create a new folder. And I'll just use folder name model, create a new file, and I'm going to use a class, and a class name would be to do. Enter, and that's our work web application one.model, and then this is our class name. Now in here, I'm going to create some sort of data structure, which is going to be ID, name, and is complete. I think those three things are more than enough. Next, we are going to create a database context class within the same folder. I'll click on new file, use a class, and I'll say to do DB. Once we have a class, then I'm going to be importing the entity core framework. So the keyword for that is using Microsoft.entity core framework. So this package is basically we installed. If you go in here, you'll see here's the entity core framework that we installed. So let's go back, and then we need to extend our class with DB context. Create a constructor using public and the same name to do DB. We use DB context options and the to do class, pass in options, extend this with the base and pass in options for that as well. Within this, we just leave the constructor empty and we're going to create another property, which is going to be public. Say DB set. It will be to do again. And then we're going to use to do's lambda function, which is set to do. Okay. Now here we got probably an issue. We need to use DB here. That's our database context class. Now let's go back to the program.cs file and reference that here. First, use the namespace we created, the web application model, copy that, and we go back to the program, and right above on the top, we're going to just use using keyword, and we're going to use that model, that semicolon. Now we can create some endpoints, but before we do that, we need to add the database context for that to do DB in our application using dependency injection. So right after this builder service, use the builder again, .services add DB context, and that would be to do DB start a function. Let's just say opt user lambda opt use in memory database, and we can name it to do list. Basically, we're telling it to use the database context using in memory database, which is the package that we installed. After this line, use builder.services again, .add database development page exception filter. So that's really for our local development. Now we are going to create few endpoints. One of the endpoint would return all the to-dos in a database. We also need an endpoint to create a to-do and get to-do by ID. I will first paste the code and I'll explain. So we're using the app.mapGet, which creates a get endpoint. Here, the first parameter of this function is the URL, in this case, /todos. We also have async to do, where it's like giving you an access to database context, and you can use that right here in db context.todos. And then here's a function to list async. It will just return all the to-dos in a list asynchronously. That's our first endpoint. Let's create an endpoint to create a new to-do. I'll paste the code to create a new to-do. Use this map host function on the app, which requires an endpoint, which is in this case is /to-do. Then it is also asynchronous function and then it needs a to-do schema and db context. Add a new to-do. Then we're going to save that asynchronously using the database context. And then we also returning the newly created to-do. We're going to create another end, which will return a to-do search by filter by ID. Now in this case, we are using this app of map get /to-do items /ID. Then it is again the async callback function, and then it needs an ID in this case to search against, and then it needs a to-do database context as well. So we're going to use this await db to-dos, and there's another function available for us, which is find async, and it requires ID. It just filters through the ID, and then we choose is to do. then we can return that. Otherwise, we say not found. Now, once we have all these three to-dos, we are going to go to terminal and make sure we stop the server. And then I'll type .NET watch command, which in this case will run the server in a watch. I'll wait for that. Once done, then we're gonna open our local host. What is the URL? So you can basically click here and then go in there. So here we got the hello world. Now let's go ahead and then create another API call, which is gonna be to-dos. Enter, and then you get empty. Now, to be able to post need to do, unfortunately, I can't do that in the browser easily. So what I'll use is VS Code extension, which in this case is going to be HTTPS extension. So if you look at the extension list, you search for HTTP, you can download this extension, REST client, and this client is great for making an API call. So the API calls can be inserted into this web application one.html file, and here's our post request. And local basically means the server it's going to target to. It's like a local variable that we can use, and then /to-do means this is going to be the endpoint, and we need to match that endpoint with this. So to-do, that's good. Now I'm going to click on send request, and then it returns the newly created item. So if I send it again, it throws an error that the same ID has been already added. So what I need to do is change the ID to 4 and then send request. Then we have the to-do created right there. Now, I'm going to use this get call, which is again coming from this extension. So if I click on that, you see this makes an API call and returns all the to-dos that we created. We can verify that. If I refresh this page, you'll see here is the same to-dos. We can use the pre-print as well to print the JSON kind of format. Let's create a few more to do. Instead of sending an ID, we can create an ID dynamically. So we will create an ID right here. We're going to create a new GUI equal to GUID dot new GUI ID, and then we're going to use int. Let's just say ID equal to, then we can use the bit converter dot to int 32, and we can use the GRD dot to byte array, and we can just pass in a 0 there. Now we're going to use the ID for to do, so we'll just use this to do dot ID equal to ID. All right, go back to the base path. We're going to click on, let me just send request, and then you see it is again passing the ID right there, which is wrong. So I'll just remove it, send request, and you can see it is now creating all the IDs automatically for me. Once I send request, you can see all of them are there. Before creating an endpoint with authentication, we need to go and install some of the packages. You can install the NuGet packages by using the VS Code command, but I'm going to quickly go to this file. And here I will just paste some of the packages that I want to install, and I'll talk about those. And as you can see, that first package is identity package that is provided by ASP.NET Code. With the Entity Framework Code, it allows us to create a user authentication, authorization, and it comes with a lot of boilerplate code automatically. And the second package is called authentication.jwt that allows you to add the JOT or JWT token-based authentication. We have this Entity Framework Code tools. And then the last package I'll install is to allow the Swagger support for our .api code. So this package which allows us to do that. First of all, let's go to the program.cs file. And I'm going to just paste the code here for a Swagger. So this way we can actually save time by typing a lot. And then I'm just going to go just below here. I'm going to paste the code. Now, it is now going to really allow us to, just import all the stuff what we need. We added a service like add endpoint API Explorer. Then we have this add Swagger Gen. It needs innate options. And then we can use this dot Swagger doc. We can call it version 1 or whatever. And new API info. We can set the title as well. And I'm going to just say tutorial. Then we have some configuration. For example, scheme is going to be the barrier token, then the barrier format, and then parameter location. So all of these are pretty self-explanatory. Then we have a security requirement. So we use this options.add security requirement, where we have another one from the .NET new Open API security requirement, and you pass some configuration to it. Next, we go to the terminal and use .NET watch command again. We're going to go into the browser, and the Swagger docs should be available on /Swagger. Let's take a look. Swagger, not there. Maybe we need to restore the package. .NET restore again, and then do a .NET watch. After adding the Swagger services, you're gonna have to inject that into the app as well. So if I go into development, I would like to paste the code here. So we're gonna say app.use Swagger because we have already injected the service, then app Swagger UI, and that will be just route prefix will be Swagger. Okay, let's go to terminal and restart the .NET application. Once it's running, I go to Chrome and I refresh the page. Here are our APIs for all the to-dos. So if I click on try it out, then you'll see it's got nothing in there. Create a new to-do, try it out, remove the ID that's automatically generating one, execute, and you can see all the to-dos. So let's make sure anybody can access these to-dos all authenticated by using password. The main part we're going to implement in our application is authentication and authorization. First, use the builder service and call add authorization. Then use this builder service, add identity API endpoints, type as identity users, call add identity framework store, which is going to be auth DB context. So auth DB context doesn't exist. I've already created a file, but let me show you what you need to do. Import packages like ASP netcode identity, EF core, and then the EF core. Next, create a namespace, which is going to be web application model anyway. And then we're creating this class auth DB context, which is going to extend this identity DB context identity user. And then we are going to create a constructor for it, auth DB context, and then pass in DB context options to this, and then extend the base from this identity. Then we got some configuration if you want to. That's it for now. Now let's go back to program.sysfile and the error will go away. Add this auth DB context into your database of builder service, add DB context, auth DB context, and use in-memory database, or you could use any other database that you're using. Once you've added that bit, then if I go ahead and then say restart, then it should not cause any error. But if I go ahead and then refresh the page, you'll see we got this web application one, but to-dos endpoints are here, but not the authentication. Go back to the code to map those endpoints. First, add the service. Let's go in here. After the app, called app.use authentication and the authorization. Map those identity users that, and then you are going to save the file once your application reloads, refresh, still not there. So I think you need to do save, and then we go refresh, still not there. The problem, context override some configuration, paste the code after the constructor. If the model gets created, the model builder will do something. For example, builder.entity identity user, then we are making sure that the property email confirm exists or it has a default value set to false. Let's save the application and then restart the application by typing .NET watch command. Then go to Chrome and refresh. Once you refresh, you'll see you got the register login button. So I'm going to now go ahead and then create a new user, I have this JSON schema, which is a hello world at gmail.com. Click on execute. We got the 200 response, which is good. Now let's use the same schema and log in. Click on try it out and paste it, execute, and you'll see the token, refresh token. So your authentication is working. Now let's just say you want to make sure that the to-do list is authenticated. Try out. You get empty to-dos, which means you are able to call that to-do. I'll go ahead and create a couple of to-dos. We'll create one. We create another. That's good. If I go to to-dos and execute this API call, you get to see we got two to-dos. But now let's make sure that the user who's trying to access the to-do is authenticated before it can do it. So I will go to VS Code, and right after this to-do call, we're gonna say dot required authorization. Now save, and once you're done, go to Chrome and try to execute this API call or refresh. Let me check. Refresh. Still able to get it, but we need to restart the application. I'll stop it and say .NET watch. Let's go to Chrome, refresh. If I try to access to-dos, it should not allow me. If I click on this, it should say unauthorized, but we don't have any to-dos. We're going to create some to-dos. I'll use this API call. Let's just create some to-dos. That's okay. And then we're going to have to log in. Now we restarted the application and created a new user because it's an in-memory database. It's not going to store, or it's not persistent database. That's a problem. We have to create a user again. Let me just use the same JSON structure. Once we created a user, then we're going to go log into that user. Let's save. Here we got the token. What I need is this token now. Let's copy this token, and we're going to use this token authorized, and we logged in with that. And then if I access the to-do instead of unauthorized, it should return all the to-dos I created. As you can see that this simple function will make sure the user is authenticated. And within this API call, you can do a lot of checking whether the token is valid, or if it's all the to-dos are basically created by user, that should be just returned. So all that stuff. So in this case, we are requiring authorization for this to-do to be retrieved. That's it for this tutorial. I'll create more .NET tutorials. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Cheers.